Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us today for our live Q&A for the Quibi series Most Dangerous Game, which is such a fantastic series. It is also currently nominated for Emmys as Outstanding Short Form Comedy or Drama Series, and also Christoph Waltz is nominated as Best Actor in the Short Form Comedy or Drama Series. And we are so thrilled today to be joined by Christoph Waltz, who plays Miles in the show, and Nick Santora, who is the writer, co-creator, and executive producer of the show. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. You know, I wanted to dive straight in with you, Nick, because this is a project that has actually been percolating in several forms for a number of years before becoming this version in Quibi. And you were actually originally brought in to do a pass on a feature script by Scott Elder and Josh Harmon. And then it went from that to a longer form television series to this. And I was just really curious about what that journey looked like and how you worked with the script in all those different iterations.
Yes, it's the journey, like many things in this business, was sometimes frustrating because you believe in the project and you want it to get made, but sometimes it's just not in the cards. But starting from feature form and then going to a pilot, I believe for NBC, and then to Quibi, it was 8+ years, I think, if not longer. The fact that I today get to speak about it with you and with the great Christoph Waltz and have the great Liam Hemsworth involved with it, I'd say it was worth the wait. I'm very thrilled with how everything turned out.
Yeah, it turned out so fantastically, and you arced all of the episodes so beautifully. And Christoph, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the experience of reading the script, because you've been very open about the fact you had a little bit of reticence initially, just thinking about the concept. And I was curious kind of at what point when you were reading through the script that you really kind of saw what that vision was going to be and what you felt the show was going to look like and feel like overall.
I was skeptical because I wasn't sure that, you know, a short form for small screen, all of that. Then I started reading it, and I love the moment when my skepticism and hypercritical attitude, when I feel it evaporate, you know, and after 3 episodes, I couldn't stop reading. I was really, you know, when someone came in and wanted to talk to me, I said, can't talk right now. So that means because of this hypercriticism that I harbor at all times, I immediately was really, really into it, because there's nothing as exhilarating as being relieved of hypercriticism.
Yeah, and I know that you often like to read a script and actually not even always know what part it is that you're reading for. And I was just curious if you had that experience with this, or you knew straight off the bat when you were reading it that you were going to be playing Miles.
No, this over positivism, I don't think is really a constructive thing, because you need to give it a chance. And if you think from the start that this is going to be the greatest thing ever, it doesn't really stand a chance anymore. You know, take it easy and be careful. And as the masterful writing unfolds, my fascination and my involvement grew, and until the very end. So, you know.
Yeah. And then Nick, as you all were casting the show, you know, particularly when you were casting Liam Hemsworth and Christoph, what were the things that you really felt they both brought to these roles that maybe you just didn't feel like anyone else was tapping into in terms of those characters?
Oh, well, I mean, they just bring, you know, an immense amount, and I know this sounds like a very basic answer, but immense amount of unmatched ability and talent in their craft. Mm-hmm. Liam is, I've said this before, he is at his heart a really nice guy raised by a nice family. He's a sweet human being, and his character is a sweet human being. He's an everyman who gets put in an extraordinary circumstance. And Liam played that to a T. What Christoph Waltz brings is the ability to play a character who has despicable qualities, but also has relatable qualities, where you can see this guy's running a really messed up game here. He is a messed up job, but he's also feels the pressure from it. and you see the humanity in that character. And I don't think there are any two actors that we could have gotten to play this role that would have been remotely as perfect for it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about the way that Christoph brings that into the role. And so I wanted to ask you, Christoph, about how you kind of mapped that out and balanced that, because literally within a scene, sometimes we'll see that really despicable side. And then all of a sudden we see like almost a hint of a nurturing nature in him and an actual genuine care for Liam's character. And I was wondering if for you, if those moments really just jumped off the script, or if that was something where you sat with the pages and you thought about what the different tones were going to be of his personality.
Look, thank you very much, by the way, for the accolade and the praise. And you can't play what's not on the page. That's a very old story. You know, it's not even wise anymore. It's so old. If it's not written, you can't play it. And the only thing you can try to do is get out of the way, you know, and let it unfold in front of you and in front of maybe the viewer, and that's the fun, as I see it, in doing this at all. You know, to see what the writer has written and then try to give it room.
Yeah. And in terms of elements that aren't on the page, one of the interesting things about your character as well is we only see him in this microcosm of this specific world. We don't actually know anything else about who he is, what his home life looks like, if he has a family, kind of any of those details. Do you find it useful for yourself to construct that, or did you really just focus on the character on the page?
I hesitate to answer that question, but let me just say this. Backstory is all very important or not. You know, it's good. Anything that gets your juices flowing, so to say, but there is no orthodox teaching that tells you, oh, this is how it's done. It's in the character. If it's really written well, like this one, it's all in there. Like you and I are talking, and I kind of, you know, I don't know anything about you, but I get an impression, and all I want to know for the moment is what I get.
Fantastic. And Nick, one of the things I was really curious about in terms of the overall game is the intricacy of figuring out those details, because it's so beautifully and fantastically structured, and there's such clear rules for all of the players involved, which was an interesting aspect. And, you know, I was just interested in how you mapped out what those rules were going to be and the moments when you were going to allow the characters to play with them and bend them, such as later on when we see all of a sudden maybe there's going to be gun involvement, which has always been off the table, and how everything ebbs and flows a little bit for dramatic effect.
Yeah, with respect to, you know, figuring out what the rules would be, there's the aspect of it which is frankly pure imagination, which I think, you know, sometimes you get, you know, I'll get asked, and I know this isn't the question you're asking really, but sometimes I get asked, you know, how do you come up with that idea? And my answer is, if I knew, I'd do it all the time. Because sometimes you don't know where the ideas come from. You sit, you pace, you walk around your house, and something pops into your head, and maybe it would be a cool rule if they couldn't do this, or maybe it would be a cool rule if the phone went off every hour on the hour and gave away the location, or whatever that is. So, you know, that stuff is just honestly make-believe. There's also an aspect of it which is production. Mm-hmm. When you're writing, you know, I've been producing from 15, 16 years now of my 20-year career, and sometimes it's like, listen, we need a reason. If the audience is going to ask, well, why doesn't this guy just run across there and go there? It's like, well, because we can't afford to go shoot over there. So I need to say there are boundaries for this guy. And sometimes, honestly, it's just putting a producer hat on while you're writing. I know that's not the fun answer, but that's the truth.
No, it's also really informative as well to hear it that way. And then as you were constructing the visual locations, I mean, you mentioned that some of it's constructed by where you can afford to shoot. Sometimes locations determine the story a little bit, but there's such a wide breadth of locations, and you really kind of focus in on a specific different location and setting for each episode, which brings us into a new world. And so I was interested in the way that you decided what those different spaces were going to be in terms of creating the look and the feel of each episode.
That a lot of that is research. If you're a writer and you're writing in an area that you're not familiar with, you really better do your research. I know there's an abandoned zoo on an island right off in the Detroit River or something like that, and I really wanted to set something there, but production, we couldn't do it. You know, there just wasn't time for it. But you do your research of your location and you find things that you think will be cinematic or things that lend to really cool story. Wait till you see season 2 that's set in New York. That's my hometown. So there's some really cool stuff that goes on and some really great locations. Yeah,
that's where I live. I can't wait to see it and some familiar locations. And then Christoph, I wanted to ask you about working with Liam Hemsworth. You guys have such a fascinating rapport together on screen. And I was just interested if you worked together before you started filming to build that, either through rehearsal or just conversations with each other, or if it was less of a necessity because your characters on screen, in fact, don't have any history with each other.
You know, Billy Wilder allegedly asked when he was presented a cast of a couple lovers in a movie, the first thing he asked was, do they hate each other? And when the producer or studio head said, unfortunately they do, he said, good. That gives the whole thing more energy. It was not like that with Liam. Liam and I immediately established a immensely civilized and amicable rapport, and it was really, you know, mutual respect, mutual support, and certainly my admiration for him. It was sheer pleasure to be in his presence. So no acting required.
And then it's also so interesting to watch the way that Miles interacts with all of the different hunters, because they're really, really well developed with completely different personalities and interests and subsets. And, you know, Miles kind of knows little pieces of them. So the way that he speaks to each of them is very different, which I thought was an amazing choice to make. And kind of, again, similarly, was that something that you thought about in any way and how you wanted to approach each of those different characters? And did it present a challenge with the fact that you're really just having phone conversations? You're rarely in scenes with anyone else throughout the entire show as well. You
know, in general, I would say thinking about something is always a good choice. So it helps. And the great Leon Fleischer, the pianist who just recently died, said, practice less, think more. It's also, if the script is great, you got your material, you know, employ the gray matter and you're going to have fun.
Yeah. And then, Nick, I wanted to ask you about Phil Abraham, who is the director on the show, and kind of the reason behind that choice that seems like a very natural choice for him to direct every single episode as opposed to pulling in different directors at any point. You know, the episodes are shorter, but at the same time, it's still, you know, it's like an hour 45 of content at the end of the day. So it still is a big task for someone to capture all of that.
Yes, well, listen, from the beginning, we knew we were going to prep it, film it, and edit it prep it and film it like a feature, edit it differently, but with the same teams I've used before. And I had worked with Phil before on a show that I ran and wrote called Breakout Kings. It's actually behind me. And he's a phenomenal director. And when you hire a director for a single episode of television, and every single cast member comes to you after and says, please bring that guy back. You know, you have a director that actors like to work with. Then you look at the film and you realize he's given you every piece you need in post. You realize you want to work with that person again. And we realized we had our paths didn't cross because I had just come in to do one episode of it, but we had worked together almost 20 years ago on The Sopranos. And so we and we're both from New York. We have a lot in common. And I think Phil is as responsible for the success of this as anybody. He really created beautiful compositions. He works incredibly well with actors. And I feel very, very fortunate that he said yes to do this project. Yeah,
and I believe that writing on The Sopranos was your first television writing credit in the industry. And yeah. I was, obviously having such a wealth of experience, even just since then, if there's things that you still look back on that you learned from that time on the set of The Sopranos and writing for that show that you still kind of lean into in terms of the way you approach writing and your overall process.
The Sopranos experience taught me to be just grateful. I was an attorney at the time when I got that job, and I was a very unhappy person. I was not meant to be an attorney. Just not what there's nothing against attorneys. They're an important part of society, but I was miserable. And I remember walking in, I had written a screenplay that won a film festival in New York. And I got a meeting with David Chase as a result of it. And I remembered walking, and this is a true story, walking in, looking at the sidewalk as I was walking in and just saying to myself, the next hour determines the rest of your life. Do not blow this. And luckily it worked out. So I learned from that experience to just, man, be happy when the finger of fate taps you on the shoulder and gives you some good fortune.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you both a little bit about the way that this was really approached as if it was a feature film. It wasn't, okay, we're filming episode 1, we're filming episode 2. It really was that overall arc and structure. And for you, Nick, with working with Phil and structuring that out, and for you, Christoph, in terms of how that was a beneficial tool for you as an actor coming into an environment like that and having them approach it in that way.
It didn't make any difference to me. Because, the actor is just an actor, I'm loath to say. And you never shoot in sequence anyway, be that television, be that theatrical. And so in this case, it wasn't an issue at all, not for me, and I don't think for anyone else either, because it's really those guys' job. So, which is a good thing, because if I had to consider dramaturgy to that degree in what I do, I'd have to, I'd go.
And how about for you, Nick? How is that kind of a beneficial tool, particularly working with Phil and structuring everything out in that way?
Structuring the story was in that manner was tricky, and it was challenging. And I just find it exhilarating, 20 years into my career to still learn and get better with every project, or hopefully get better with every project. I can honestly say I believe Quibi has made me a substantially better writer. I've written a few series for them, and it just forces you to not waste the page, not waste the real estate on the page. And working with Phil and going through each episode, and we would just discuss, listen, we have to hit this and we'll deal with it in post, but can we make sure we get this at the end? This is the turn, this is the twist, this is the reveal, this is the moment for Miles, this is the moment for Liam's character. And when you're working with a partner like Phil, you just know you're going to get it. I like to tell studios and networks when we're hiring directors, I go, I just want to sleep at night. I just want to not think about what's going on set. And so when you have a director and a cast that you don't have to, I never worried about this show when I wasn't on set, because I knew it was in the hands of true, incredible professionals.
Yeah, and kind of off the back of that, and the way that for Nick, you're saying that it made you a better writer and you really learned things about your craft from this. I was curious if the same was true for you, Christoph, because again, it's just, you've done so many incredible projects throughout your career. And I was interested in kind of, when you walk onto a show like this, what it is that you actually still continue to learn about your craft and your process as an actor and take away at the end of the day.
I get in line with the actors who say, please bring Phil back. I'm perfectly willing and happy to cut the line and get in front of everybody. So you get the script, you get the director, you get the project. Everybody, as Nick just said, on the top of their game, yeah, you make a step in your development, be that whatever it may be. Very often you only discover after a while that, when you actually face a situation where you need to employ something new, and you say, I got that. Where did I get it from? Oh, I got it from Quibi. So, you know, everything you do that's worthwhile doing, and don't do it if it isn't, it will help you progress. And if it's something new, you may even jump ahead of yourself.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly dive into one of the audience questions that we have for you, Nick, from Noel, who's saying, I remember reading an original short story of the same name by Richard Connell when I was in junior high. I was always so fascinated by the variations of this story or themes throughout the years. What elements of the original story or even variations were most important to maintain in this Quibi version for you?
I know it sounds like a basic answer, but excitement.
Mm-hmm.
The story is an exciting story. And you want to keep the audience engaged and excited and never looking away from their screen. You don't want them going to turn on their laptop or not pay attention for a moment. You just want them sucked in. And that story, I agree with the person who submitted that question. That story, I remember it from when I read it in public school growing up, and I remember it having an effect on me. I want this to have an effect on people who watch it. I want them to say, man, that was exciting. That was great. That was not a waste of my time to watch that. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. And then this next question is for both of you, and saying, I'd like to ask if you've ever had to deal with imposter syndrome, and if so, how did you overcome it in terms of your creative process?
I deal with imposter syndrome constantly, every day, wherever I go. But that's me, sorry.
No, it's great to hear. And I think it's lovely for people to realize that it is a relatable thing that everyone experiences at every stage of their career. How about for you, Nick?
Ironically, when I got hired into my first law job, I got hired by a very, very big law firm in downtown Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And I don't, to this day, I don't know why I did this, but I confided to a partner there. I feel like a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing. And he reached into his desk and he took out a paper that he kept in his desk. Now, this guy was a partner at one of the biggest law firms in Manhattan, very powerful attorney. And he handed me an article that was written by a psychiatrist decades ago about imposter syndrome. And he goes, yeah, I have it too. Read this article. We all have it. And I read it. And ironically, over the past few years, I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, I think I'm starting to shed it a little bit. I'm not good at anything except maybe writing and producing. And I think it's okay to say, all right, I'm good at this one thing, and yeah, not to beat yourself up over it so much.
Yeah.
I'm good at imposing.
I love it. And then kind of, coming back to talking about the show a little bit more specifically again, I was really interested in the camera work and the way that you set that up, because there's such an engine to the way that the camera moves, and it really, really sets the pace and the tone and like the perspective that we have of those characters, and is so thoughtfully executed. So what was that journey of figuring out what you wanted that to look like for everyone on screen?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Most certainly.
I wish Phil was on here.
Yeah.
Phil and I discussed tone and we discussed pace, mm-hmm, and he definitely discussed the look of what he wanted to go for. And after that, it was, I don't believe in telling the chefs how to cook. When Phil came in, it would be as presumptuous for me to tell him how to cook as it would be for me to tell Christoph how to act, or to tell our craft services person how to make the meals. That's not my job. Phil Abraham made this thing look fantastic, along with an incredible DP and an incredible crew, and Phil will be the first one to throw accolades towards them. They're just phenomenal at what they do.
Yeah. You know, and thinking a little bit more about the psyche of your character, Christoph, but also the hunters and the participants, I was really curious how you got into the mindset of understanding and reconciling with how Miles would have come to be part of the operation of this. Like, it's not even just that he's participating for the first time. He's hugely entrenched in running the show, which is such a fascinating psychological standpoint for a character. So I was really curious how you kind of thought about that journey for him, and also for the hunters that he was working with, who clearly enjoy and revel in this game frequently.
Years and years of psychoanalysis.
That makes sense. And what was your journey in terms of that as well, Nick? Because obviously you had to really understand it from the standpoint of the script when you first came onto it, and then with working with developing these characters throughout the years as well.
Years and years of failed psychoanalysis. Listen, you sometimes put your imaginary hat on and just pretend. You know, if I was a Nigerian hitman posing as a priest wanting to scare somebody, what would I say? It's really that simple, and you just try to make it interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry to butt in, but this is so true what Nick just said. Imagination moves much more, you know, not only writing movies, action, but people, than presumably facts do. And that's why we're working in fiction, you know, that's why politicians should work in reality.
And one of the interesting things as well with the story, Nick, is the fact that it is set in this completely real world setting. It's in a city that's in flow. Every day things are happening all around these characters in extraordinary circumstances. And I was curious in the way that really added a dramatic element, because it makes you feel like you know, as an audience member, you almost feel like more of a participant, and you feel like anyone could end up in this world.
Yes. Having it in a city created, I think, various beneficial things for the story. One is you can feel like you're there. You're just an onlooker in the crowd as the audience, and you're seeing this guy run, and you're thinking, where's he running to? What's going on? And it's almost like you are a participant. And two, it also adds to the tension. If you were in a small town, there's only so many people that could be coming after you. If you're in a city, it could be, as Christoph said, as Miles, it could be the butcher, baker, or candlestick maker that's going to try to take you out. And also Detroit's just a city with an incredibly rich, phenomenal history. So why not use it?
It really, really is. And then I wanted to jump into a couple more of the questions that we have. Sorry. This one was about season 2, which you were mentioning a little bit, and how that's going to take place in New York. And someone was wondering, what cast members can we expect to be back, if any? Obviously, hopefully Miles.
Well, yes. The Mr. Waltz is going to lend his talents to us again, for which everyone involved is incredibly grateful. And as other than that, all I can say is there are certain actors that I have reached out to. I can't say yet because they're not done deals, but you would know their names and recognize them in an instant. And we're going to have another amazing cast.
That's really wonderful. And what are the aspects of Miles, Christoph, that you're really excited to dive into and continue uncovering and discovering through playing him again in the next season?
I can't say concretely, but expansion of surprising, oh, hello, of surprising additional facets and qualities of one and the same character.
Yeah. And there's also something that you said about working on this show, Christoph, that I loved, that you said that you actually wish that a lot of films that you'd worked on approach the way that they make them in the way that this show did. And you touched a little bit on some of the things that you love, but what are some of the specific things that you think would be really beneficial to pull into the filmmaking experience from?
For example, conversations with Phil Abram. That is really top level not only professional, also personal communication. The man is the real deal, and one can learn from him by spending as much time as one can get.
Yeah. And then there's another question that's come in for you, Nick. A little bit about what we were talking earlier when you were mentioning how you became a better writer from this process, and saying you mentioned earlier that the Quibi approach to storytelling has made you a better writer. Could you elaborate on some of the ways in which it's done so?
Yes. I will be the first one to say this, and I think some other television writers would admit to this too, and feature writers. You have 42 minutes and 34 seconds to do an hour of network television when you remove the commercials. And sometimes you only have 41 minutes and 5 seconds of story. So you throw a scene in there, or you expand a scene, and it's a little bit of fluff, just this much. And, it's a dirty little secret, and we all know. And you make it entertaining enough that people watch it and enjoy it. But you've put a little, like, I know in New York, you're from New York, Carvel Ice Cream used to advertise, they don't use an air pump. They don't fill the ice cream with air. Sometimes you put a little bit of air in the episode. With Quibi, you cannot do that. You have between 7 to 10 minutes. If you try to pause, or if you try to vamp a little bit when there's not real story there, the audience is going to see right through it. They're going to turn it off. They're going to get annoyed. They're going to say, all I asked for was 7 good minutes, and you couldn't even give me that. So it really forces you to not waste an inch on that page and make every line sharp, every moment important or just interesting, and give the actors something to play with. So that's how I think it has honestly made me better. You can't cheat at all.
Yeah.
I think I cheat a lot. I don't want to make it sound like I cheat a lot. But
now we all know your secret.
With all the other things.
I think, Christoph, in terms of kind of looking back and reflecting at all of the amazing scenes that you shot in this show and the way that you thought about them and approached them, was there a particular scene that, was kind of the most challenging to you, that you feel like you're proudest of shooting out of them all?
No, I really think it's part of the job to see the challenge in its different incarnations and appearances in whatever it is that you're doing. Because if you think, that I got that in my pocket, that's the one that the whole thing is going to trip over. So yes, it's difficult to convey a complicated rule or the terms of payment in this thing, in pages of dialogue. But that's a specific challenge, to just sit and listen to what someone says on the other end, who seems to be dying and tries to escape. That's a different challenge again. So you have to, distill the one essential that you're after.
Yeah, it's such a well-constructed and fantastic show that literally it makes you want to jump straight into the next one. And it has been such a pleasure talking to both of you about how it all came together. And I can't wait for season 2, as I'm sure everyone in our Q&A right now can't wait either. So thank you so much to both of you for taking time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.